welcome, first of all.
Thank
and just to begin with, Europe has survived a lot of crises in the recent years. It's survived, obviously, the economic crisis, the pandemic, although the pandemic isn't gone, and now it has a war. So past performance is no guarantee of future performance, but it would be interesting to hear your overview of the challenges that the European Union faces on these fronts, and particularly the migration front.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. When President von der Leyen called me, interviewed me, and then decided to give me this job, she told me back in October 2019, she told me that I want you to be the most anthropocentric member of my team. I don't want you to do tariffs, services.
It's a good Greek word. I like that.
I think she researched. And then she explained that she wants to bring under one roof policies that pertain to the Europe that protects, migration, security, public health, and policies of a Europe that empowers education, culture, sport, mobility, skills. And she said, believe me, this is probably one of the best jobs I have to offer. What she didn't tell me is that all these anthropocentric policies were the ones that are more exposed to the crisis that hit us. So we are now living behind a period of 2 years and a half, where practically everything happened in a way that not even a Hollywood science fiction scriptwriter could have imagined. Yeah? The first pandemic since 1918, the instrumentalization of migration flows on our external border by authoritarian leaders that want to attack Europe through the weaponization of human suffering, and now a war. The early conclusion, the first conclusion I'm drawing as we're leaving this period behind, is that Europe, the European Union, proved much more resilient than many would have expected. I'm not a newcomer in European politics, but I very clearly had this sense of history making in certain moments when we as a college, for example, decided to buy vaccines by using probably one of the weakest legal bases in the treaties, which is the legal basis for public health. When we decided to set up this recovery fund on the basis of common debt insurance, not individual, by member state, or the certificate, or now buying weapons for Ukraine with EU taxpayers' money, or stopping the flights from the countries of origin and transit to Belarus. These things happened. And they happened because, as we said, we were very decided to provide responses that make a difference in people's lives. This Brussels of the perpetual analysis and the impact assessment and turf wars no longer serves the world around us. So the obvious question is, what next? And it's not a secret that we're meeting at a moment where all the ingredients of a perfect storm are accumulating. High inflation, we Europeans...
I thought you just described a perfect storm, but now you're talking about another perfect storm coming.
I described how we came out of a storm, or of a succession of storms. Now I'm about to share with you my ideas on how we prepare for what is to come. And the starting point is, of course, that, and this is probably a message to people from the private sector being here with us, is that we now find ourselves at a moment where the spiral is really at its lowest edge. And this looks worrying. This looks ugly. But every time in European Union history that the EU spiral touched its lowest ebb, it was always to mark the rebound to its highest. So I will not share the analysis of many prophets of doom that say that this is the end. No, it's not. Probably it's the beginning in a way that we can, in fact, design things that we should have done a long time ago. This is the moment where the era of innocence for the European Union is over.
That's a powerful phrase. The era of innocence is over. So it obviously leads to the question of, what are these things that should have been done long ago, specifically that the European Union is now going to have to grapple with and make real, tangible progress that makes a difference in this anthropocentric sense that you talk about?
This is indeed the right question to ask. Look, it took us a pandemic to realize in Europe that we do not produce masks, ventilators, and our raw materials for our pharma industry are all imported. It took us a war to realize that for years we have built an energy dependence from regimes whom we thought would be collaborating with us or would approach our way of life or model of society. That's another illusion that it's over. We thought that we are surrounded by non-EU but still European-minded players who would like to see the European Union succeed. This is not the case. I see 3 former empires around us that do not want to see the European Union succeed. The United Kingdom, Turkey, and Russia.
That's a bit unfair about the United Kingdom, but we'll let that go, yes.
Have you read the news today? Okay, it's unfair. But these are the components that compel us now to do things differently. On public procurement, on industrial policy, we have 52 sites manufacturing vaccines in Europe, which is a huge success. We have now PPP, public protective equipment manufactured in Europe. We are now putting the finishing touches on, this is the subject of the day, I understand, on energy independence and how we will end our dependence from Russia. And there are very encouraging signs that this new strategy will work. Probably not in a way which would be apocalyptic tomorrow morning, but we have paved the way for a policy response that would be robust. New providers, more reliable providers, the US, Qatar, Egypt, Norway. EU storage facilities. We've been struggling for years to do something as simple as that. Now it's being done. Common procurement, public procurement of energy. This is the vaccines moment for energy. It will happen, I have no doubt about it. Also,
But with respect, those are the relatively easy things. You mentioned, I think, very correctly, these moment of truth for really tricky, really difficult decisions. And if let's focus on 2 areas, right? That first of all, migration, because the EU has had pressures for migration, as Greece knows better than most countries, for many years now. But it's always struggled to have a burden sharing across the Union. And we could well see far greater migratory pressures as the war in Ukraine, if, alas, it continues for a long time and engulfs more, potentially affects more countries. So what could change? What are these things that the EU should have been doing years ago that will now finally face in the migration area that it might now do?
Well, looking at the migration area, I think Europe was rather successful when acting like a fireman, but rather unsuccessful when acting like an architect. we managed to cope with successive migration crises in a way that few would have expected. We stopped these weaponization attacks at our external border convincingly. In a way that was not done before. The three leaders of the EU institutions were present on the ground in the Greek-Turkish border the day after the events. And in Belarus, we managed to stop incoming flights from 6 countries of origin and transit, whom we sort of convinced / obliged to stop. So, and now we have 6 million Ukrainian refugees to whom we have given unconditional and immediate access to our job markets, health, education systems. But all this was done on fire brigade mode. My ambition is that by the end of this mandate, Europe would have a major, historic European agreement on a cohesive, holistic migration and asylum policy. We have proposed this structure, this architecture, already in September 2020. Unfortunately, the pandemic did not help the negotiation and the convergence. But after the German election and the French presidential election, I now see for the first time real convergence. And on the 10th of June, we had a major breakthrough. For the first time, we have an agreement on around 4 of the 7 elements of the EU Pact for Migration and Asylum. So there again, I hope, and that's my ambition, that's my main political objective, to get it by the end of this term.
So by the end, just to be clear on the timing, you say by the end of the term, you may not have that luxury of time. I mean, is the end of this year a possibility, or is it going to take longer than that?
Since we are amongst ourselves, I'll be more precise. Now we have the Czech presidency, and immediately after the Czech presidency, we have a succession. First of the Swedish presidency. Sweden is the biggest reception country in the EU. And then immediately after that, Spain. Mm-hmm. And Spain is the biggest frontline member state, together with Greece. So there will be no better political window of opportunity to have
this at the top of the agenda, basically.
Between the 2 presidencies. So that would take us first of 23 by the end of 23. So 1 year ahead of the end of our
Well, that's a very interesting steer from the architect-in-chief, if you like, for the... But let's go back then. The second theme I think it's interesting to explore, and as you say, it's been the theme today, will continue to be the theme, which is energy. Because although you say, yes, you've identified these new suppliers, nevertheless, there's going to be a squeeze on energy perhaps as never before, potentially this coming winter. And that may not bring out the best in the instincts of the individual governments. You know, naturally, governments are going to want to protect they will be anthropocentric in the sense of their own voters, not necessarily European voters. So how do you overcome that? What preemptive, this is a storm you can presumably see coming. What are you doing to handle it in advance?
Well, first of all, I think for this winter, we will be okay. As a result of we have not simply identified new providers, we have, in a way, pre-purchased energy from these new providers, and we have de facto agreements with the Americans and others on LNG. Secondly, we are putting forward a massive investment plan through Repower EU, which is 300 billion from the recovery fund that can go straight immediately into this energy independence drive. We have identified also and submitted to the prime ministers both a toolbox and a strategic plan on how they can, within their member states, take decisions that alleviate the pressure on the most vulnerable consumers and businesses. And this is now being done in this country too. And it's done in a way which is compatible with EU law, so we do not distort competition within the single market. And let me also say that the final touch of these plans, probably not the easiest one, would be to prepare for alternative scenarios, solidarity and burden sharing in case we have a surprise of total cut. This is the most important thing. And our teams are working now full steam ahead to cover also this eventuality. Storage is going up. And I think Europeans would also need to make an effort in terms of air conditioning. The Economist Conference could lead by example.
We could learn a little bit to turn it down a bit.
Because behavioral aspects of energy policy are part of the solution, without any doubt.
Final question for you. Our time is very limited, but if you lift your eyes up from these very practical problems that are coming our way, what sort of Europe do you think is going to emerge from this?
I think Europe's worst enemy is complacency, stagnation, and the feel-good factor. This is killing the European project. On the contrary, every time that the Europeans are faced with an external threat, with an enemy, if you like, with pressure from public opinion. I come from a small rural community in northern Greece. Each time I go back home, the only thing people ask me is, what is Europe doing about this or that? For them, it's given that Europe should come and provide answers. So the future of the European Union will not be a future decided through treaty change or in mega conferences or in the European summits and at the Berlaymont. It would be decided as to whether we're able to show the resilience and the boldness of our action that we have been able to demonstrate in the last 2 years and a half. If we manage to do that, then I think Europe will, at the end of this cycle, at the beginning of the new one, will be very difficult to recognize, frankly, in terms of performance.
Well, good luck to you. You have a challenging time ahead, but for this anthropocentric Europe, it's a crucial work. So we wish you well.
Thank you
very
so much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.